Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Strive, I welcome you all. Today we will be discussing Afghanistan, connecting past to future. If you want to know the causes of failure and guess the future, we must know the past. So we have to understand the topography and demography both of the Afghanistan. How the tribes, various groups are operating, what are the differences, what is the loyalties. Same time we all know the Taliban is a creation of America itself with help of the Pakistan. It was created against the Russia. Once Russia left the Afghanistan, then Taliban took over the administration of Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001. Then 9/11 took place, World Trade Center was attacked, and American government decided to move into Afghanistan and wipe off the Taliban in Al-Qaeda. After 20 years, same American government handed over the administration to the Taliban. Withdrawal of troops is not under discussion, but the way it has been withdrawn, leaving the warlike equipment to be used by Taliban, in the mess has been created, that of course has come under a lot of criticism. Should we take it? It is failure on part of the USA, and if so, what are the causes? See the interests of neighboring countries of Afghanistan. A lot of contradictions are there. Earlier, Iran and Russia both were supporting the Taliban. However, due to their own personal interest, they are waiting. And now they are just because they have to take on the interests of the own nation. Iran has to look after the Shia community, where Russia is more interested Central Asian region. Now China, of course, is eyeing on the mineral of Afghanistan and openly supporting the Taliban. Of course, they also got interest Belt and Road Initiative. But same time, they had the negotiation with the Taliban, asking them not to interfere in Xinjiang and give any support to the Uyghur Muslims. Now here comes the problem. One side, Taliban is saying they are the Khalifa of the custodian of the Islam, and anywhere was in support of Muslims they will speak. Can they keep quiet against the Uyghur Muslim in long run? As regards Pakistan is concerned, as it is, Taliban is not recognizing the international border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Second problem may come up of the TTP. Because Taliban made it very clear, TTP is a problem of the Pakistan, not the Taliban. So now we have to see what is there ahead. Now the formation of government which was done with the help of the Pakistan played very important role. Initially, it was said that Taliban will have the inclusive government. Yes, they had the inclusive government. They included all the terrorist possible groups. Today, if you see out of 33, 15 are listed terrorists themselves in the cabinet. Now, discussion of good terrorism, bad terrorism again started. Taliban is good terrorist group for the US, America, where Al-Qaeda, Jaish-e-Mohammed and ISIS bad terrorists. Now we have to see how it's going to impact the Central Asian region and the India. On line of this, we'll move ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, the question answer session will have the end. At the end, please post your questions on the chat box. Rest assured, questions will be taken and we'll try answer all the questions. First, Air Marshal Amit Tiwari, PVSM, AVSM, Vice Sena Medal. He'll be talking to us on the keynotes on the Afghanistan. Air Marshal got commissioned in Air Force in 1982. He's a fighter pilot. Held all the important appointment of the Air Force, staff and command. He was also DA in Afghanistan. In fact, he was the first Air Force officer went as a DA in Afghanistan. And that time happened 2008 when our embassy was attacked and we lost two of the officers, one army officer and the other was foreign service officers. He got very deep knowledge on the Afghanistan. Second, he also had the privilege of commanding two air command, the Southern Air Command and the Central Air Command. So I'll be requesting Air Marshal, please take on the keynotes on the Afghanistan. Air Marshal, all yours.
Thank you, Colonel Chauhan, for your kind words. Good evening, everyone. Right at the beginning, I must thank Strive and General Chaturvedi for inviting me for delivering this keynote address. As for the US intervention in Afghanistan is concerned, it has become as much of a history as British intervention of 1839 to 1919. Various theories have been given and more will come. Why it happened, what was the reason of failure. But it is here what I have been told to give some kind of logic to it. My request to everyone is to study more and see, look at the history, look at the ethnicity, look at the neighbors, look at the stakeholders, look at the national interest. That will tell you why it has happened and why US could not succeed. I've got one small presentation because better than the keynote address, I can tell you in a better manner with some kind of maps, etc. I'll share with you. Okay, let's start with geography because this is the oldest one and it doesn't change. This is the topographical map taken from the Google Earth. Just look at this area. All around Afghanistan, there are different countries. You can see the green patch, you can see the snow, you can see sea. All these countries have got something to sustain. They're fertile lands, there are rivers flowing. You've got sea, from there you can carry out your trade. But in center is Afghanistan. It has got only mountains, bare mountains. There's no greenery out there and desert. Afghanistan has river, but the rivers are snow-fed. So if the snow is frozen, there's no water in the river. If the snow has melted away, there is no water in the river. Only when the snow is melting, there's some water in the river. So Afghanistan produces nothing, just some dry fruits or opium. Why will anyone come to Afghanistan? In cost-benefit analysis, coming to this difficult terrain and feeding its people, what will you take out of this? So no one ever came to Afghanistan for nation building. Everyone right from the history came to Afghanistan because India was on this side. It was either transit to India or stopping transit to India. That was great game for which Britain went there. Now let's see another map. There's the normal political map. Before we go over the map, few things. In earlier Soviets did a survey and subsequently US did a survey in 2006. They found loads of minerals and ores in Afghanistan. That includes iron, copper, silver, gold, lithium, rare earth. US estimated it to be about $1 trillion. And if Afghanis are to be believed, it was $3 trillion. China itself invested in Ayank mines in 2006, but not one digging has started in Ayank mines. Why that has happened? Now look at the stakeholders. On the north are Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, all erstwhile Soviet states, now under Russian influence. They wouldn't like US to succeed. In the west is Iran, Western sanctions, it didn't want US to succeed. In south and east is Pakistan, almost client country of China, it didn't want US to succeed. With the result, nothing happened in Afghanistan in last 20 years. If anyone remembers the TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, it is still on design board. But now, China, US is out, and China is the one who is influencing all these countries. Is anything possible in Afghanistan? When we are on this map, Just look at another feature. There is this, just look at the cursor. There is this necklace road in Afghanistan. In the north, it connects Turkmenistan and Tajikistan. From there, one can go for trade in Central Asia. In the south, it used to connect Peshawar and Quetta. And from Peshawar and Quetta, one could go to Karachi and Gwadar for trade. What India did in 2006, which was earlier attempted by Americans in 1960 and 70 and Russians in 70 and 80, to connect this point Delaram on this necklace road to the border Jaranj and to the Iranian road network at Jahedan. We given the Afghanistan another outlet to carry out the trade. What happened in 2011 when this road became operational? In 2011, the trade between Afghanistan and Pakistan was 2.7 billion. By 2020, it had come down to 700 million. Was this a reason for the Pakistan to get cheesed off? Because I told you about national interest. Remember, the national interest of the Pakistan is to have a weak Afghanistan dependent on it. It doesn't want Afghanistan to become independent and strong. Otherwise, they will start demanding the area south of Durand Line. Now, let's come to this map. This is the ethnicity map. It shows that they are Pashtuns, 42%. They are Tajiks, who are 27%. The rest are Uzbek, Baloch, Turkmenistan, Hazara, and all. They are all different tribes. A lot of people say that Afghanistan has got tribal loyalty and ethnicity and all. Yes, it is there. But let me tell you, normal Afghani is very smart. It's not only the tribal and the ethnic loyalty that he follows. If you ask a person in Kabul, what are you? So before he answers that I am a Pashtun or I am a Tajik or Hazara, he might say I am a Kabuli. Afghani in Kandahar might say I am Kandhari. A Panjshir will say I am a Panjshiri. If it suits him. If it suits him, then he will say I am Sunni. Or if it suits him, he will say I am Shia. As I covered earlier, there is nothing which grows in Afghanistan. So how do they survive? They survive with fighting with each other. It is there in their blood. When I was in Afghanistan, there was a joke. I am an Afghani. I fight with my brother. Me and my brother, we fight with our father. Me, my brother, father, we fight the village chief. Our village fights the next village. And next, all the villages put together, we fight the next valley. The same was observed by Winston Churchill when he said every man's hand is against the other and all against the stranger. There's one more thing special about Afghanistan and their fighting. The fighting is never decisive. Whenever Afghani feels that there is no chance of winning in this fight, he will give up. He will say, okay, you have won. This issue is gone to you. And he will go start living peacefully and start searching for another reason to fight. A lot of TV reviews and all have gone and Graveyard Empire. It is a romantic notion. The countries made almost similar mistake. And I'll just show it to you here. Britain went in 1839. Soviet Russia came in 1978. US went in 2001. Remember, none of these countries went to Afghanistan to help Afghanistan in any manner. Britain went for great game. It didn't want Russia to move in further south. Russia went in 78 because before it went, there was kind of communist government, but they were fighting together. Russia didn't want a country coming in the communist fold going out. So it went to sort out. They thought it will be something like Czechoslovakia, will go in one summers and come back. It didn't happen. US went in 2001, chasing Osama bin Laden, aimed to uproot Al-Qaeda and overthrow Taliban. Now what happened? Once they reached there, they found that they cannot really come back. After reaching there, you'll just see the similarity between all three. After reaching, Britain went there. Dost Muhammad Khan, who was the popular king, they removed Dost Muhammad Khan, replaced him with Shah Suja. Now, Afghani is seeing infidel has come to my Islamic land. He has removed my king and has put another guy. The another guy will be considered, even if he is good, that he is a stooge. Russia went there. King Jahir Khan was removed. Daud Khan came. After Daud Khan, every 2 years there was a change. Finally, landed up with Babak Karamal and Jahir Shah. Babak Karamal and Najibullah. Do you think anyone had any Afghan had any loyalty with these guys? These are the people who were being put there by infidel. Same thing was done by US. Karzai, who was a minor minister in earlier government, but he had gone out of Afghanistan. He didn't have any grassroots support. He was brought in as a president. On top of it, Karzai was replaced by Ghani. Ghani's all education was done in USA. Ghani was a World Bank employee. He came to Kabul. He became a professor in Kabul University, subsequently finance minister in Karzai's government. He was more of a technocrat, no grassroots support. So all these guys, by a normal Afghani, were seen something imposed by an infidel. You've done this. Now, next, what the Britishers did after reaching Kabul, they disarmed all local militia. They said no one will have their own forces. There will be one central force which will control everything. They started imposing taxes. Now, all this is alien to Afghanistan. Soviet Russia went there. They also started to impose some central control, more on the communist thing, not too much emphasis on religion. US went, modern civilization, democracy, education, human rights, women rights. A normal Afghani had never heard of these terms. Now they said this infidel is coming here and trying to change my way of life. On top of that, there was a reduction in funding. When Britishers realized that there is nothing is coming out of Afghanistan, they told their contingent there, please cut down your expenditure. Do you think contingent will cut down the expenditure? Contingent went ahead and reduced the subsidy to the tribal chiefs. USSR could not afford. In January 92, they told Najibullah that no more money. Subsequent budget, slide, I will show you how US reduced the budget. There is another saying in Afghanistan. You can rent Afghan loyalty for some time, but you cannot buy Afghan loyalty. Here, the infidel has even stopped paying the rent. With the result, what happened? Britishers were overthrown, Soviets were almost overthrown, and US moved out. Credit to US that moved out after 20 years. They survived for 20 years. Having seen that, let's go over the causes of the failure. Most of us are from armed forces, so I'll keep it more focused, what we understand best. Selection and maintenance of aim, this is the first principle of the war. When US went to Afghanistan, the aim was to catch or kill Osama bin Laden, devastate Al-Qaeda, overthrow Taliban. They achieved overthrow Taliban, devastate Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden ran away. But they couldn't leave Afghanistan, otherwise Taliban could have come back. So there was a change in aim, they decided to stay there. When they were staying there, they decided that we might as well change the government. They started bringing Western style of democracy. Change of aim. Halfway through Western style of democracy, they started Iraq war. The effort shifted to Iraq. Obama came, the entire theory got changed. It became AFPAC. At no point of time, there was a fixed aim in Afghanistan. How do you expect them to win? There was this gentleman, Machiavelli, in 1500. He was in Italy. He wrote a lot about different states and their relations. Machiavelli in 1500 wrote, do not trust exiles. Because exiles have got their own axe to grind. What US did, even in Iraq, they brought Jalal Talabani and made him, who was a Kurd, made him prime minister there. And we saw the result in Iraq. In Afghanistan also, they brought Karzai and Ashraf Ghani, who were almost in exile. In 2002 and 3, there was an effort where Taliban wanted to come back to the mainstream. But US depended on the Northern Alliance. Northern Alliance were in exiles. Northern Alliance never wanted Taliban to come into mainstream. They advised against it. US never listened to the other side, where the Karzai was cheesed off also subsequently, and we know the history. Now, Machiavelli also mentioned that whenever you're going to another country to occupy it, go with the overwhelming force. In army, we know this much more, troop to population ratio, etc. Because then it cuts down your exposure. You will achieve your job faster and it cuts down your exposure. Just 2 years before coming to Afghanistan, US and Allied had gone to Kosovo. Kosovo, they went with 50,000 troops. And you know, the population of Kosovo is 1.9 million. Now, if I compare it with Afghanistan, Kosovo population 1.9 million, Afghanistan population in 2001 was 21.6 million. Kosovo is 1/10 size of Afghanistan. Afghanistan terrain is much more difficult. Against 50,000 troops in Kosovo, Afghanistan by end of 2002 had 8,000 US soldiers on ground. Do you expect them to win? Next comes the funds. The similar thing had happened in Europe. Bosnia had gone through a war. And remember, Bosnian war was not as long as Afghan war. They still had the infrastructure and some kind of system going there. US and Ally got together and they decided for first few years, the expenditure in Bosnia should be done $1,600 per inhabitant per year. What was this figure for Afghanistan? $50 per inhabitant per year. Where is the comparison? The introduction of new system, partly I have covered it earlier. When US invaded Afghanistan, they wanted to bring Western style of democracy. They have done it successfully earlier when they did it in Japan and they did it in Germany. But remember, Japan, Germany had some system going on. In Afghanistan, there was no system. There was just village and some kind of jirga going and people get together and decide each other's fate. So now US told them, no, this will not do. There will be a judge there. There will be a police also there. We will study, we will teach law to everyone. But there will be schools. There will not be any madrasa. It was a new system. Now, for a new system to work, it has to be successful. Now, Afghan, a tribal mentality, they started with a doubt, but now this new system didn't function at all. There were no judges, there was lack of police, schools were there, but there were no teachers. So where does an Afghani go for his problem? Taliban stepped in, started moving in, started taking up the place and filling up the vacuum. There was no long-term plan when US went there. US went with every president, every new president who came, the first thing they announced was the withdrawal time for Afghanistan. In fact, US didn't plan for a 20-year war and didn't lose a 20-year. US lost 1 year war 20 times. That was the thing, because every year the war was planned from year to year. There was no long-term planning. When US went there, it was war against terrorism. They wanted to catch Osama bin Laden. They wanted to uproot Al-Qaeda. Slowly, this war against terrorism converted into war against insurgency. They didn't announce it as much because then they had to take some other actions. Now, all of us know if it is war against insurgency, the insurgent hideouts have to be hit. Insurgent hideouts were in Pakistan. Almost similar situation is in Vietnam when North Vietnamese were attacking from neighboring countries. US didn't attack Pakistan. Now people will ask, why didn't US attack Pakistan? That was the Pakistan factor. By coming to Afghanistan, US really boxed itself in a corner. As I covered earlier, US couldn't have come to Afghanistan from north because Russia was there. Couldn't have come from west because Iran was there. The only way that US could have come through Pakistan. So all these 20 years, US had to cajole Pakistan. You had to bribe. US had to bribe Pakistan. You had to keep Pakistan in good humor. At height of insurgency, US contractors used to pay almost about $1,000 per truck for it to transit from Pakistan to Afghanistan. Most of this money went to drug smugglers, local warlords, and Taliban. A lot has been said about US troop withdrawal from Afghanistan and meltdown of Afghan army. In real sense, this troop withdrawal didn't come. It didn't happen overnight. We were surprised because we never expected US to leave. Otherwise, writing was there on the wall. If you see in this graph, there is a massive drawdown in 2014. December 2014, Obama announced that there will not be any more combat operations involving US troops. We will only be in support. There onwards, US stopped fighting in Afghanistan except for providing the air support. In 2019, US came out with a document, strategic document, where they changed Sino-Pacific to Indo-Pacific, and Sino-Pacific, Indo-Pacific started from western coast of US to western coast of India. It mentioned China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. It didn't mention Afghanistan. In 2016 itself, US started talking to Taliban in Doha. What were Afghanis waiting for? It was clear writing on the wall that US is going to leave. In the end, in July, May, June, July, how many troops did US pull out from Afghanistan? Just about 2,500 troops. These troops were not fighting the war. They were mentor, they were trainer, they were arranging the airstrikes. So it shouldn't have come as a surprise that US has pulled out. No, they have pulled out in a methodical manner. If you look at the budget also over a period of time, it went close to 2011. There onwards, the defense budget as well as the reconstruction budget was reducing in Afghanistan. And like any other graph, it will finally touch zero. Now, a lot of people say that the Afghan forces melted. They didn't put up any resistance. In January 2019, this was the slide which President Ghani showed at Davos. From 2014 to 2019, 45,000 Afghan defense personnel died in war. Just 72 Western forces. All the fight, December 2014 onward, was conducted by Afghan National Defense Forces. But I covered earlier, all the fighting, the Afghan fights for a reason. Now, Afghan was fighting, this National Defense Forces were fighting because Taliban said that this infidel has to go out of Afghanistan. That was one reason. And Ghani government has to go. That was second reason. Now, Afghanistan Defense Forces saw that infidel whom they were trying to save has started talking to Taliban. And by 2019, 2021, they were saying that the infidel is going away. And when this infidel goes, who is going to support Ghani government? Ghani government will also go. So now, is there any rationale? Is there any logic behind any fighting? At the end of it, you are also Afghan. I am also Afghan. I don't have any reason because I'm not saving anything. And because the wars are not to be decisive in Afghanistan, they just melted away. We'll find another reason, another day, and we'll come back. So a meltdown in Afghanistan didn't take place in isolation. It happened.
Request to conclude, sir. The request to conclude, sir, please.
Yeah. Last part. Now I'll leave you with some points. Is there any concern in Western world? Remember, Taliban was there from 1996 to 2001. Their policy against human rights and women rights was same. They have promised US that they will not be attacking US from their soil. And in 2001 also, had they handed over Osama bin Laden, US wouldn't have attacked them. So now if they keep their promise, do you think the world is bothered what is happening in Afghanistan? Recognition of Taliban government, a lot of people give a lot of emphasis, the Taliban government will not be recognized. Taliban survived without recognition from 96 to 2001, only 3 countries, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, recognized Taliban government. They will survive now also. Now the situation is better because all the stakeholders, all the neighbors are with China and China is with them. China holds the key. The purse string is with China. So now if China today decides, this is a point to ponder, they tell Pakistan that you take the lead, we will do the backseat driving. Pakistan will be more than happy because Pakistan want to control Afghanistan, keep the Afghanistan dependent and weak. A win-win situation. A lot of people say that, okay, Taliban has not changed, but people in Afghanistan have changed. The guys were born in 2001 and 2, they haven't seen Taliban. They have born in democracy. They know their rights. Let me tell you, till 1975 in Afghanistan, in Kabul, the girls used to come in long skirts to the university. They were pushed in the Stone Age, they went into burqa. What happened recently? Hong Kong wanted to get into democracy. What happened to Hong Kong? What happened at Tiananmen Square? Do you think it will take very long for Taliban, who are much more ruthless and cruel than what China can do, to push people back to Stone Age? The problem will come, who will foot the bill? Taliban is very rich. Taliban is 5th richest terrorist organization in the world. 1.6 billion was their budget last year. But Afghanistan budget is 5.5 billion and 80% of this budget is paid by US. So who is going to pay the bill? And if the budget doesn't come, will there be peace in Afghanistan or infighting will start? Can Taliban be trusted? Taliban has told US that no terrorist attack from their soil. They have told China that will not support Uyghur movement. They told Pakistan will not support TTP. They have told Russia that no terrorists to Central Asia. They have told Iran nothing to worry about this Sunni state out here. But Taliban is not a monolithic structure. All the guys who are in Taliban were together because they had one aim of pushing infidel out. Now infidel has gone. What is new reason to fight? Can they stay together? A lot of people say this is the last thing. A lot of people say options for India, and India has put all its eggs in the same basket, and we should have spoken to Taliban earlier. We just keep talking to Ghani. But let me tell you, Mullah Biradar, who is Deputy Prime Minister, in 2008, he tried to talk to Karzai to join the government. Pakistanis came to know they put Mullah Biradar in jail, and Mullah Biradar stayed in jail for 8 years. In 2016, on request of US, Mullah Biradar was released to go to Doha and talk to Americans on Pakistani instructions. Sirajuddin Haqqani is a veritable arm of ISI, as told by Admiral Mullen. Sirajuddin Haqqani's group was involved in 2008 bombing of Indian embassy. Do you think an ISI guy is going to talk to an Indian? Or for that matter, any Talibani will like to talk to Indian. The moment they talk to Indian, they will lose their credibility or neck, both put together. With this, I leave this, I finish this keynote address, and I know I have generated a lot of questions. I'll be here in case there are any questions. Over to you, Colonel Chauhan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. We'll take on the question at end of the session, sir. Of course, participants can post their questions in the chat box, sir. Of course, Marcel covered very prominent point, demography, in the topography, both how that affects the Afghanistan and the character of Afghanistan citizens, including the tribes. To move ahead, we have got two general officers with us who will be in the conversation to take the discussion forward, whatever points have been put, to try to get the answers. With us, we got the Major A.K. Chaturvedi, AVSM, VSM, and Major Harsh Kakkar. Major A.K. Chaturvedi, AVSM, VSM. Officer got commissioned in 1974. He's a sapper officer. He did all the possible course of Indian Army. Of course, same time he held all the appointments, including Tri-Service Command and IDS. After his retirement, He has a number of books to his credit. His area of interest are national security, energy security, water security. He also been awarded Rashtriya Atal Award for Military Engineering. He is an excellent sportsman. A lot of achievement in that. He gives a lot of lectures in the various top institutes of India. He keeps writing various articles in various newspapers and magazines. Very frequently, he comes on the debate on various national channels as well as the foreign channels, covering various subjects of national issue. Then we have, along with us, Major Harsh Kakkar. Everybody knows him. Being gunner officer, got commission in 1979. Again, held all the appointments, possible appointment of Indian Army, did all the prestigious courses. He was the head of Department of Strategic Studies at the College of Defense Management. He also served as a United Nations Peacekeeping Force. He did course also abroad. He keep writing articles in various newspapers, various magazines, in Indian as well as foreign magazines. He comes very frequently on various TV debates on national and as well as the foreign. He got very close knowledge, deep knowledge on Afghanistan and China. Now I'll request both the general officer in conversation take us ahead, see what is going on or what lies ahead. General officers, please.
Thank you, Jiten. That was very kind of you to have said so many good words. A small slip up on your part, but that doesn't matter. Major to major journey was quite long, but that is okay. So anyway, now we will commence our discussion. Thank you, Harsha, for joining me in this conversation. And first, I intend to cover this in about 3-4 parts. First, we'll discuss about the political situation. We'll also discuss about the governance status presently existing. Also, we will discuss about the geopolitical implications and status. And finally, what is there for India and how India can deal with this. When we talk of political situation, I think although Marshal Tiwari very nicely covered, but some certain things we must know the fault lines within them. Actually, calling it that Afghanistan 42% Pashtun territory itself has got its own implications. They have got number of differences. Say, Baradar is a Popalzai Durrani. Then Haqqani is Zadrans, these are very low. Ghani was Ahmadzai. Akhundzada is a Nurzai. So, therefore, these fault lines keep emerging, as Amit very rightly said, that when they have no one to fight, they will find a reason to fight. So now it's probably that state has come, that Afghanistan itself, because of this kind of a thing, is happening. And now, second part of it is that there have been also certain other things which we need to take into account. One is Pakistan, America has given legitimacy to Taliban by doing their own talking to them. Now they are becoming they have got their own problems now, and the problems are that legitimacy which they give to Doha. So now it has divided Haqqanis versus Doha factions. So that's another issue which we need to take into account. Third is that Tajiks in this government formation almost have been left in cold. More than Tajik, it is Hazaras who have not been included at all. With these kind of things, there is a inter-Afghan problems. And here one has to take into account that 42% Pashtuns are not monolithic. And if Hazaras, Tajiks and Uzbeks come together, they become 46%. So there's almost a parity. So a good situation for some kind of a say internal fights which will keep going on. Now, the second issue which we need to take into account is that Haqqanis, they have always been supported, say, propped up by Pakistanis. In fact, as Amit very rightly said, that Haqqanis, that General Hamid had to sit for 3 days in Serena Hotel to see to it that they get the lion's share. And Mullah Baradar, who was almost supposed to become number one after Akhundzada, was relegated to be a deputy prime minister. And I think that is where the problem is coming up. Now, another interesting thing which we keep thinking that Taliban have got their own support base. There's an American-based independent think tank, Asia Foundation, and they did a survey in 2009 and then 2019. 2009, their surveys showed that Pashtuns and rural areas, folks, all for which is more than 50%, they were for Taliban. But 2019, this figure had come down to just 13%. So thinking that Afghanistan is with Taliban may not be right. And those long queues, people jumping onto the landing gear, people jumping onto the wings of the aircraft, trying to run away from there, showed all this. And in any case, Doha Agreement, whatever was said, to Americans they did not harm, except that ISKP, when 13 Americans were killed. Afghan life had no meaning for even Afghanistan's and others, as the figure given by Amit also showed. So 183 people who died in that attack by ISKP, nobody spoke of them, but 13 Americans were valuable, and that's how they left. Second thing in the Doha Agreement was that they will have, it will not be used for terrorist operations. What is ISKP? Akhundzada is aligned to Al-Qaeda. So then the Alman Zawahiri has appeared. So these are the things which Harsh, I would like you to comment on those kind of things. And there's another thing is ministry. As in your writings, Harsh, you had been mentioning that 17 out of 31 are designated, 33 are designated terrorists. And say someone like Sirajuddin Haqqani has got $5 million bounty on his head. And in Haqqani, Sirajuddin, Khalil, Anas, Najibullah, Abdul Ahmad Baki, they're all Haqqanis. So there's a host of them. Now, one thing which is there, the military issues also, I would like you to comment, because if you notice, loss of Badakhshan was a reason the connectivity in Panjshir and Tajikistan was lost. And that ensured that Panjshir, although is holding, but because of no connectivity in Tajikistan, there's a problem coming up. Now, in this case, there's another issue. Afghan, in all 33 other provinces, when they, most of them except one odd in Kandahar or where Ismail Khan tried to put up a fight, most of them were by negotiated deals. So therefore, in this, Taliban as a fighter is coming out as a weaker issue. So that's another thing which we need to take into account. Now, may I have your comments on all these things so that we can further take it up?
So firstly, we've got to consider the fact that the entire rank and file of the Taliban come from the same madrasas in the erstwhile Fatah. Okay, so that's the rank and file. They come from there, whether they join the Haqqani, whether they join the Taliban, whether they join the TTP, all of them come from the same base. The fact that for all these years you've had the Quetta Shura, the Peshawar Shura, the Miran Sahib Shura, basically implies that they've all been in the same location. The next factor which comes in is the moment you come in and get success in operations, the next is sharing of the spoils. Automatically, there will be a fight for sharing of the spoils. It's not here alone, it's anywhere where such organizations have come into chair. Now, the infighting, what we've seen, and Baradar now coming out, and possibly a video of his now coming in, and it's taken quite a few days. Why the audio initially? Why a video? That also from a particular direction now. There are all doubts in what the situation is. Akeunda is still not to be seen, so nobody really knows where things are. So there are issues within the organization which possibly is being suppressed because the Haqqanis hold the power. The interior minister is the most powerful guy. The rest of them are all sidelined. If you look, when the Qatar foreign minister came down just about 3 days ago, who were the lot that met him? There were none from the Doha group which met him. And Qatar was the one which hosted the Doha group for a very, very long time. So where does it indicate that they have been sidelined? There is no doubt. Now, if you look at the NRF, who is supporting the Panjshir, the Masood force, which is there, the northern resistance? It's not Tajikistan alone. It's Iran also. Iran is another country which has got its interests there, which is one of the reasons why it refused to accept. Now, when you look at the form in which Afghanistan government is coming, who's accepted it? Tajikistan has rejected it. Iran has rejected it. Russia is maintaining silence. The only two nations which are supporting it today are Pakistan and China. Nobody else. Even they are hesitant to recognize it for fear of global backlash. So where are things today? Internally, Afghanistan may exist as a nation. It may have the government in place, but there's really nothing much which is happening. And like you mentioned, the Pakistan influence, there is no doubt that it is Pakistan which was behind the current formation of the government. There is no doubt that Pakistan wanted a weak government in Afghanistan. It wanted a government which is pro. It wanted India out. But Pakistan had three basic aims as far as forming the government was concerned. First, India should have no role in Afghanistan. It should be out. Second, sign on the dotted line and clear the Durand line issue once and for all. And third, suppress the TTP. The attacks by the TTP on the Pak army have increased manifold. The Taliban troops are just waiting for instructions to break down the Durand fence, and they say we will sell it in the market because we need the money. As far as India is concerned, it is currently wait and watch. Feelers are coming in. But these feelers mean nothing, because unless we will only act along with the world community. So nothing much really happening there. But yes, Afghan-Pakistan relations are still not the way Pakistan wanted it to be. They still haven't come down to that sort of a system, because Pakistan's demands are going to impact the current status. But when you look at the governance parts, you've got a Taliban force. But is that your army? Is that your police? The loosely armed, undisciplined force, which is, trying to threaten its own people, trying to apply pressure on them. Can you convert them into a barrack-type disciplined armed force or a police force which you need to run a nation? Can you do that? Are you in a position to do that without really? And if you can't do it, what's going to happen to them? Now, if you look at the ministers, all of them have links with terrorist groups. If the Russian NSA makes a comment that there are 10,000 ISIK people along the borders with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan waiting to get into Russia, it indicates that Afghanistan is not the area along the borders, even if they claim they're running the country, is not under their control. Because if you have to overrun the areas which are held by ISIK, you've got to launch an attack. You've refused to control the TTP. The ETIM is presently sitting quiet. It has not been subdued. The only statement made by the government, by the Afghan government, is that ETIM has left Afghanistan. If it's left Afghanistan, where has it gone? It hasn't gone to China. If it hasn't gone to China, where else can it go? It can't go into Pakistan because its interest is Xinjiang. So actually speaking, like has been mentioned, that there are things which are complicated and nothing as such will come through, nor can we really consider it. All this, sir, gets linked to what we need to now come on to are the financial issues. Can the government, the current Afghan government, manage to survive in the current financial state? That is where I would want you to now move on to.
Yeah, Harsh, very nicely you have summed it up. And the issue about finance is a bedrock of any kind of a governance. Earlier, Afghanistan had following sources of revenue. One was border transit fee. Second was that they had some kind of a drug money. And third major was aid. Now, what US and Western world has done, IMF funds have been frozen, World Bank has refused, EU has refused. So whatever is money there that has all been stopped. So now they have no source, which was 60 to 70% of their financial support system has gone. Second was transit fee. Iran has closed the border, Pakistan has closed the border. So there is no transit fee coming. So either it is now only drug money, or it is that those 6 lakh rifles they have got, 2,000 armored carriers they have got, and they start selling. And as you said very rightly, that they will break the Durand line fence and they'll start selling the weapons. But that is something which is not sustainable. In this case, one more thing which I would mention about their problem area. Nobody has spoken about it. Afghanistan is substantially an arid area, as Amit had brought it out. So what had happened in last few years, a survey was done that Kabul River, though is snow-fed river, but it has got substantial amount of water when it comes to Indus. So therefore, almost it is 4.5 MAF of water it has got. So a survey was done so that this arid region of Kabul Valley and all those things could be say watered and irrigation could develop, and so is the agriculture. They had already made out of 12 dams they had thought of, and that was incidentally, I mean, without saying beating about the bush, India had done that feasibility. Now what they did, they have already made one dam called Shatut Dam and one of the distributory, 11 more dams. In case if that water comes up, some kind of a agriculture revival in Afghanistan will take place. But along with Durand, this will become another point of dispute between Afghanistan and Pakistan, because water they have no treaty. In 2017, Pakistan offered to have a treaty which then Ghani government refused. Similarly, neither Afghanistan nor Pakistan is a signatory to UN Convention of 1997. So the water is going to be an issue. Durand Line 1993 onwards, which is there, and it was basically it divided the Pakhtuns. So Pakhtuns, they don't accept it. In fact, more Pakhtuns are on Pakistan side, and that is one of the reasons why TTP is saying now Pakistan thought that Taliban being there, TTP would be suppressed. It has happened other way. I mean, in your one writing, you have only mentioned that in the month of July, almost maximum attacks took place. And even they are sorting out Chinese also. So in case if the Pakistan probably will have problem, TTP versus this Taliban, if the greater Pakhtunistan, as say people like Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan and all had espoused the cause, maybe reality sometime again in future. So as far as financial portion is concerned, this is resulting into by some estimates, 92% of them are going to go under the poverty line. The issue is the food is a very humanitarian crisis is emerging there. So UN has come out with some kind of a thing that $600 million they have earmarked. Now look at the great supporters of Afghanistan government, and this is coming out clearly to Afghans. China has promised $31 million, but as you have also been writing, and I have also been, I mean, everyone knows that it always comes with a string, and they have given still no sausage. And it is only probably what they will be giving is a vaccine, which nobody is buying, and some medicine. Pakistan has 2-3 plane load of medicines they have given. So, and Pakistan is in no position to support them financially. So it is going to be a very major human crisis, and I think world will have to come together. And my sense is that India, which always espoused the cause of people-to-people contact, this may be in future an opportunity for India to once again show to Afghan people, because our support base in Afghan people's mind is intact. Because India never asked for anything. Whatever we did, we spoke, we got nothing in return. This word which press is using, investment, is all wrong word. To my mind, it was all aid, it was support to people to people. And the model in this very interesting part of the model is that we gave local support. There were local contractors, there were local materials which boosted their economy. The Keynesian cycle took place. Whereas when Chinese came, they brought everything, finished the product, and not even 0.4% went to Afghans. So this finance is something which is very important. Now, when we talk of another aspect is when we talk of, say, Russian or Iran, you had mentioned, they did committed a blunder when they killed those Hazaras in August. 9 Hazaras were killed. So that is what the tripping point was. And Iran was because US, the policy of P5+1, they had banned when Trump banned that. So Iran is in a very bad situation. They said anything we will oppose US. And similar thing was post South Ukraine, Russia. So now this will be a very important aspect of geopolitical. When India, in their now discussion with Biden, he'll have to come out that America will have to be soft on these two sanctions. Then only probably we will be able to reduce the support base. I mean, that is what I feel. Now, there are certain things which I would like you to say look at. One was TTP. This is one area where I think it's a concern for Pakistan and China both. ETIM, very rightly you have said, and all that, in case if it was so easy that iron mines, as Amit had very rightly said, that last 10 years it was there with China, but not even one pit has been dug. So the copper mines is a mirage. And similarly, everyone is talking of lithium. But China in an unstable Afghanistan, will they invest or not, is something which is a thing in future. So may I request you to deliberate a little more on the geopolitical aspect of Afghanistan and their support base and say Afghan-Pakistan relations?
So one factor before we get into it is, as far as the Chinese aid is concerned, which they promised 31 billion, it is basically going to be medicines and food. Million, 31
Yes.
million, which is basically going to be in terms of stocks of food, medicine, or whatever. It has nothing to do with funds. The other aspect, as far as nations around Afghanistan are concerned, the worry is building up because of instability which is continuing in the country. The TTP has not been curtailed. None of the terrorist groups have been curtailed. With the bargain, if you look at what Russia is doing, Russia is strengthening the border of Tajikistan and Uzbekistan by deploying additional troops. And as far as the Iranians are concerned, their famous brigade of Shia Hazaras from Afghanistan who fought in Syria are now back. Iran has already strengthened its borders, basically to prevent any overflow. It's in case anything next happens to the Hazaras, you might find the Hazaras rising with it. That is one of the reasons why Panjshir lot is being also supported by Iran and Tajikistan both. And one of the funny comments that came out that the bombing there was from a third country. It could very well have been Iran. We don't know. So the countries around Afghanistan are still concerned. That is one of the reasons why none of them have been able to, I mean, they're interacting as far as China is concerned, Pakistan is concerned, Qatar is concerned, they're interacting with the Taliban government. There is a lot of talk, including what Air Marshal Tiwari also mentioned, of China's hold and the Chinese purse, which is around the place. The fact is, the world is not going to let China get in easily and exploit it. As far as China is concerned, its interest can only come into play provided Afghanistan is absolutely peaceful and under control. Nobody is going to let that happen. The world will aim to keep Afghanistan in some form of turmoil until the Taliban displays its true character, unless it displays a change, which is unlikely, at least in the coming years. So with that sort of a scenario, expecting anything to change and the neighborhood to get comfortable is very, very unlikely. If you take that link onto India, even during Taliban 1.0, they never officially supported Pakistan and Kashmir. But the fact is that the Taliban consists of mercenaries. All of these are guns for hire. Pakistan hired a few of them in the earlier phase and inducted them into Kashmir. It will attempt to do the same. And we will start talking of it as being part of Taliban 2.0 officially supporting. It is not going to be so. These are guns for hire which anyone can take. Today, if the Taliban or the Afghan government currently, by Haqqani network, I wouldn't call it a Taliban government anymore. I would say it's more of a Haqqani government, cannot pay them. They can be bought by the TTP, they can be bought by the ISIK, they can be bought by any other organization which has got the funds. Similarly, they can be bought by the ISI and started to get pumped into Kashmir. So expecting that to happen, it will not come from Afghanistan officially. It will come from the mercenaries who flow from the same Fatah belt and are also part of the Afghan refugees who are now living in Pakistan. But of course, for us, the situation has changed drastically. The fencing, the counter-infiltration grid, the sort of control, the change in atmosphere within Kashmir Valley itself is a world of a difference from what it was in 1990. None of that existed then, and nor were we really concerned then. So we find there's a world of a change, whether it comes down to that part. What about India's options, sir? When we look at it, that's something I would like you to look at. But in my opinion, basic opinion, at the moment, till the time things start stabilizing in Afghanistan, there is no way we're going to move forward. If you look at the statement by Jaishankar when they had that meeting and nations were pledging aid to basically humanitarian aid, India supported the move, but India did not pledge any aid. India is still waiting for the Taliban to get in touch formally, is still waiting for the Taliban to interact formally with India. And until we are able to create the sort of base that we need, I was talking to one of the guys who's been living in Afghanistan for the last 20 years. He says the Taliban wants India not only to help it develop, not only to help it invest and complete its projects, it also wants India as a counterbalance to Pakistan. Now, that is something flowing from a person who knows the top hierarchy of the Taliban, a large number of the top hierarchy, because he's been there for a very long time. This statement has value and has logic basically on this ground, because they do not want to come under total pressure of Pakistan and China. They're looking to counterbalance it. Nobody better than India at the moment, and possibly Iran. So I think the ideal movement for us should be to go through with Iran and look at it. And I think we're going to be doing it because the new Iranian foreign minister should be here any day now. The two foreign ministers have already met, and possibly in the next meeting, it might be. Secondly, if you look at the way the international foreign ministers have come, whether it's been US, the CIA head, whether MI6 head, whether the Russian member of the advisor to the Russian National Security Council, why are they rushing into India? Because ultimately, if they have to go through Iran, it's only going to be India and Russia that are going to do it. The US and UK are not going to get into it. And there's going to be an intention to keep pressure on the Taliban so that things, the Taliban doesn't have an easy run. Moderates come into play and there is a change in scenario. I think that's the way I look at it. So your views?
Yeah, very rightly, you have analyzed. But and in this connection, that statement of Suhail Shaheen initially was quite prophetic when he said that India should continue its project. And Pakistan, when they wanted to break Salma Dam and pull Khumri line and all those things, Taliban didn't allow. But at the same time, there's another, I mean, and what you are saying is probably some of the reasons they say that Doha faction got slightly discredited with Stanexai discussed with Mr. Mittal in Qatar, say Oman. So that is something because right now Taliban also, which is essentially controlled by Haqqanis, is not so. And I mean, their fight is such that even it was supposed to have been that swearing in ceremony on 9th, then 11th, and till date it has not happened because there is an infighting between them. So while Doha faction may be wanting India to continue with this, Haqqani is a little harder nut to crack. Now, my own sense is there's something more that we need to be. What you are saying is about Iran. I'll tell you a very interesting thing. Last year, Iran, China, they had a treaty. They had a pact kind of a thing where 25 years, $400 billion China will invest in Iran. And actually, because of the Godar being unusable and Gilgit-Baltistan becoming so, CPEC has got its own problems. So they wanted to go to Bandar Jask in Afghanistan, which Iran has not. And I think the number of visits by Rajnath Singh, Jaishankar, all those fellows, Iran has also played his cards very well, and just they have not allowed them to come anywhere close to it. And this kind of this movement, that North-South corridor, it has enticed even Russia because it helps them also to generate some revenue. And Iran will earn much desired revenue by if Chabahar, Zaidan, Zaranj, Dalaram, and onto Dushanbe route remains functional. So that is Iran's interest, and that is one thing that money speaks. Now, as far as India is concerned, if you notice, directly you are right that it will not be easy. But if you take back your mind earlier also, may not be directly, but there will be certain things that morale boosting of, say, terrorist organizations in Kashmir Valley. And there may be those weapons which are there, as you already said, that they will be selling. So those weapons may find their way slowly, they may slip into Kashmir. And they are far better weapons than AK-47. They're M4 and M16 and with night vision devices and all those things. So therefore, I'm not so much bothered about those 100 aircrafts or 2,000 armored vehicle. They will not be able to reach India. But definitely, small arms definitely can be there. So India will have to be very careful. And in this, there are two things which my sense is. Seeing that people like some other political parties and political dispensation in India, there's a certain element who are supporting Taliban coming to Afghanistan. And say people like Mahbooba Mufti and Farooq Abdullah espousing the cause of Taliban. We will have to do some kind of a internal audit, and internal measures will have to be taken so that a national consensus on this issue emerges. And I'm quite confident that human int and electronics and defense, we are quite well placed in Afghanistan. Also, taking one point from Amit, at best there was about 8,000 troops in Americans in such a huge area. And Kashmir is 1/10 of Afghanistan's area. And there, by any estimate, almost 500,000 troops are there. And troops who are hardened. I'll share one interesting example. When I was there, we captured one chap called Nasrullah Langaryar, and he was a veteran of Hizb-e Islami of Afghanistan, who was part of Huji. There was an organization which was created in Kashmir. And he said when he was interrogated in JIC, he said, in Afghanistan, I lasted for 11 years. But in India, I could not last even for 11 months. Out of 11 months, for 10 months, I was running around. And for last 1 month, I was trying to get captured so that at least I'll have some peace. So this is the state. So I'm not so much concerned about Afghan Taliban's coming into it. but their weapons definitely would be a major threat for us. What are the options? One, as you said very rightly, that we are on the right lines. We have not tried to show any kind of interest to talk to Taliban. Let Taliban come out that they want. But we will go by UN resolution that this should not be used, and we should remain firm on that issue that Afghanistan will not be used for terrorist activities. They will not support any. More important is, bigger threat to my mind, which is coming up, is Al Qaeda Hind, which Al Qaeda may support. And they can go for something called even with 19%, 19 crore Muslims in India, they are still a minority, and they feel Harbe Islam. That means it is not an Islamist country, and they want for Ghazba-e Hind. So Al Qaeda is a threat. So is ISKP, and ISKP means Haqqani. Haqqani is you can't trust, because Haqqani means ISI. So ISI will never allow you to sleep well. So therefore, in this connection, yesterday's interview of Imran Khan was very important. But it also said no inclusive, no women. So therefore, this will not come. So there was problem. Last point which I want to raise with you is that what do you think? I mean, say, do some crystal gazing for us. That what would be the agenda between, say, Modi during his visit to with Biden in US?
If you notice the way the US emphasis is moved away from Afghanistan, so the emphasis is going to be more towards the Quad in Southeast Asia. But as far as Afghanistan is concerned, 100%, there is going to be an attempt to keep a window open. A window open for any future involvement in case, again, Afghanistan crops up the way it was earlier. And that window open is going to try and ensure that the Northern Alliance or the National Resistance Front continues to remain. You got to realize, sir, that we have a base in Tajikistan. Our proximity with Russia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan is far better than the US has been. Our proximity with Iran is far better. The way the US is now going to start pressurizing Pakistan, the hints have already come in from the Blinken interview. Of course, there is another comment which comes in that the Americans want to blame their failure on Pakistan, like they blamed Cambodia for their failure on Vietnam. But that's one part, because they knew for the last 20 years what Pakistan was doing. The only nation which neither of the two can influence is China. So what is going to happen is Afghanistan is unlikely to see peace. There is going to be a continuity in turmoil. Tajikistan and Iran are going to be the two nations that are going to be used in some context with a global understanding of continuing to ensure that there is, that there is a turmoil in Afghanistan, which is not going to benefit China, which is not going to benefit Pakistan. The world is almost washed its hands off Afghanistan. It's in no hurry to provide it with any aid, letting the internal turmoil continue so that the global security remains while Afghanistan may remain in turmoil. But I guess that is the way I see it now. And I don't see anything really happening because Afghanistan needs funds if it has to get anything done, whether create its army, whether create a police force, whether go in for proper governance, anything it needs funds. Where is it going to get from? How much do you get from drugs? How much are you going to get from sale of arms? How much are you going to get from any other source? Because what is going to come to you in humanitarian aid are going to be food stocks and medicine. How much are you going to sell? So where exactly are you going to end up as? And that is where the problem is. And why is Pakistan crying on a daily basis? Whether it was Imran yesterday, Qureshi on 4 attempts earlier, Sheikh Rasood. I mean, there is no one who's not crying that open the funds, give them funds to survive. Humanitarian and economic aid is most important. Why? Because they know that if turmoil continues, they are the ones who are going to pay for the turmoil. And the world is not going to let that get away.
We must close our discussion because I think we are running out of time. And sorry for cutting you off. And I'll just sum up in last 2-3 sentences it's a very, very difficult situation for Afghanistan. And we got to keep our powder dry. We have to keep our posture intact. Pakistan will continue trying to say gain space in Afghanistan, but then our effort should be to wean away Russia and Iran so that influence of Pakistan-China link is reduced. Thank you, Harsh. This was a lovely discussion we had. And
Thank you, sir.
now over to Jiten for further deliberations.
Sir, thank you very much, sir. Sir, one point, sir, I would like to ask, sir, Chaturvedi, sir, what will be the role of Turkey and Qatar? Like, Qatar has played very important roles, sir, in Doha. Now, how
Yes.
they can't be keep quiet, and now even Turkey, who wanted to become a Khalifa of Islam, how can they be keep quiet and keep away from the Taliban, sir?
Suddenly they have realized that their hands are full, and in the race to become caliph of the world, they may get a bloody nose. So that's one thing they have done. Not even one Afghan refugee they have taken. And earlier, what was happening in Syria, they were getting funds to get refugees. Now nobody is giving them funds. So Turkey is keeping quiet for the time being, but they are not saying anything for or against. So they are also waiting for an opportune moment. As far as Qatar is concerned, my own sense is that Qatar is still a kind of conduit for US to talk to Taliban, because this will remain so, because there is an antipathy between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. So America also plays between them. So Qatar remains principal, and that is how Qatar's minister came a few days back, and they spoke to so-called Afghan government, which was more of Haqqani government. So therefore, that thing, Qatar will continue to remain important, and Qatar can also provide certain support in terms of material support. So that is why Qatar is important. Turkey, to my mind, is for the time being, I think they'll keep quiet, and they are waiting for an opportune moment to come so that they can claim. And that's why, if you notice, even UAE, Saudi Arabia, they are all keeping quiet at the moment, because they all have their own problems. Of Turkey has got Kurd problem, so those are the kind of things which will continue to remain.
So, second thing, sir, Kakkar, sir, the US, when it evacuated the Afghanistan, it took along with its all governance expert and technical support, sir. How do you read this move of the US vis-a-vis their so-called, they are called they are behind the Taliban. So some contradiction is coming both, sir. They take all the technical support, sir. Still people are saying that US is behind the Taliban, sir.
See, the question that came in was everyone who worked for the US after having seen Taliban 1.0 wanted to get away. Nobody wants to stay there, especially those who've been involved. In fact, I have a large number of my surname Kakkars who are in Afghanistan. There is a Kakkar district in Afghanistan. They have their own jirjas there. A large number of them are with me on Twitter. And they've themselves said that we work for the Defense Ministry. We've applied for a visa for US, for India. We're not getting it. We want to get out. But that is the sort of system now. Those who work there want to get out because they know that the Taliban will seek revenge. The fact is that there has been an attempt at creating the confidence, an attempt at rebuilding up the infrastructure. They said we forgive everyone who worked with the US, come back. But nobody really trusts what the Taliban has been saying. The fear remains, because every second day you will get a video of an ex-policeman being killed or hacked or something or the other. So therefore, it's not that they took away. People who worked with them wanted to get away. Whatever remained, whether it was, I mean, if you look at whatever was there in the national security, that NDS, which is the Secret Service of Afghanistan, their entire computers, their entire material, everything was moved to Pakistan. So whatever could be destroyed, whatever could be got away was taken. But anyone who worked with the government at any level did not want to remain there for their own safety. So one side, yes, The US encouraged them to get out. On the other side, they themselves wanted to leave. In fact, if you also recollect that there have been aircraft loads of Afghan military personnel flying into Tajikistan, seeking security there rather than staying within the country, because there is no intention. The problem that falls now today in Afghanistan is, will you follow the Iraq model of removing everybody who worked with Saddam and starting from scratch? Or are you going to avoid that model and use those who worked in the earlier government and restart your government because you have a base? That is where the issue is going to come. But there is no doubt, when the US left, everyone who worked with them wanted to get out. And there are still people getting out. If you follow Rahman Rahmani, a colonel from the Afghan army, who was doing a course in the US when the Taliban took over, his sole job now is to get the Afghan pilots who are stranded in Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, all over, back into the US. As of today, I think he's got 180 pilots back. There are still a large collection more. So anyone and everyone who could get out has got out.
So one more thing, sir. Everybody is doubting about the running of the Taliban government, sir. They had the government from 1996 to 2001 till the USA came into Afghanistan. That time they had the similar situation. They had the similar resources. So how that time they managed, and we are doubting tomorrow they're not able to manage.
Up till 2001, the Taliban economy was a subsistence economy. It needed nothing from outside. These 20 years, the Taliban economy has been linked to the US dollar and the US economy. Its funds, everything remains in the US. Its notes are printed in the US. Its entire economy is dependent on the US and European funding. So today, Afghanistan is vastly different from what it was in 2001. Today, if it has to survive the way it did in 2001, I don't think the people will accept it. With ATM shut and banks not functioning, there were a lot of protests coming in, because people are used to a different form. Everybody's got mobiles today. Nobody had them in 2001. Education levels have changed. So a lot has changed in Afghanistan. You cannot go back and take the 2000 model and impose it in 21.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, sir. So now I'll hand over to Chairman, Sir General Chaturvedi. He give the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Jane. First of all, let me thank all the audience who have been the best in the world, and they listened to us. And we tried whatever analysis within Strive we had been doing, and the ranks of Strive have been further strengthened with the arrival of great professionals like Amit, who has joined us. And my very, very sincere thanks to Amit for giving that perspective and some of those important things which you said, and a very, very important analysis of Pakistan interest. And your statements like Afghans survive on fighting. It's a very, very profound statement, and history is full of this kind of a thing. If not Taliban versus American, it will be Akhundzada, say Baradar versus Haqqani. And if they also get together, then it is Amrullah Saleh versus Haqqani. So this will continue. Very interesting thing. Influence of infidel. And this is, in all these societies, it is a very common thing. And it is all underdeveloped and developing nation. This is a very, very common thing. And somebody gives the infidel name, somebody gives foreign influence, somebody gives local, say, religious influence. But cultural issues are very, very important. Americans had substantially failed in Vietnam because of the cultural issues. And here also, when they tried to change the culture of Afghanistan, Afghanistan was not with them. Say they were not for Taliban, but at the same time, they were not for even Americans. So they had faith in Constitution. Incidentally, that survey which I had mentioned about Asia Foundation, they said they had faith in that Afghan constitution which gives them democratic rights. Good point made by Amit that loyalty can be rented but cannot be bought. And this is what has happened. And Afghan National Army, when you talk of culture, they tried to create Afghan National Army which was not based on their ethnicity, whereas their ethnic affiliations are very strong. And Americans, they lost the interest and they went away. They went ignominiously. That is something there. But India has to keep our interest alive. All it is left for me is to say a very, very sincere thanks to Amit. And we'll keep looking forward to many more such thought-provoking and full of information and full of analysis from you. As far as Harsh is concerned, what can I say? He is one of the very important thinkers amidst us, and his analysis is spot on. And it's a privilege, Harsh, that you are with us, and
Yes,
together we did this. For the information of audience, I would like to tell you, we did an experiment this time. Instead of getting some speakers from outside, we thought that our intellectual equity should be put to a test and see if we can analyze this problem a little differently. And having seen number of other webinars, having been part of number of other webinars and discussions, I can say that we have come out with flying colors. To my entire team of Strive, led by General Parmar and down to everyone, thank you very much. Special thanks to Jiten. On a short notice, he agreed to take on this task of anchor, and he did commendably well. We look forward to continued support from all our audience and all those who have been part of this till we come out with yet another analysis of yet another topic which concerns India. Thank you. Good night. Jai Hind.